All right, greetings to all there. Raphael X here in my house. And please click subscribe button, like button, all that good stuff. Share this video. We're going to be talking about for our celebration of Pride Month, right? Which we're not celebrating, obviously, because Pride is a sin. We're going to be talking about what it is based on. So everyone who is anti-pride should know the principles of Yogyakarta, which was Yogyakarta is, if I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, it's in the island, city in the island of Indonesia. And we should know about these. All right, but before anything else, let's start with a prayer, asking our Blessed Mother to help us and protect us. In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. All right, very good. So let's talk about these principles of Yogyakarta, which is actually lays the foundation for the justification in society of the LGBT agenda, right? They seek to fight against discrimination, and they are almost an imposition. Well, they speak very authoritatively to the states. So it is a document. You can look it up. I'm going to leave the link below. Principles of Yogyakarta. This was some type of meeting by certain elites, philosophers, politicians, political experts, to talk about, to establish principles of changing the culture to be more pro-LGBT, right? And this happened in Indonesia, interestingly, a country which is 90% Islamic. So probably, I'm not sure if they did it motivated by the Islamic, we could say even persecution of homosexuals, which yes, is unjust, right? But what's interesting is a lot of the LGBT advocates are Islamophiliac and Christian phobic, which you don't hear that word, but that word definitely does exist. Well, the content of it exists, rather. There's much more hatred towards Christianity than towards any other group. And we're seeing that grow, especially as the culture is becoming more sexualized in a deviant way. All right. So for the authors of the Principles of Yogyakarta, the human rights are simply a tool to apply these principles to the world. So they're going to use this document, essentially, these 29 principles, as a instrument to change, right, the culture, as I mentioned. So it's good to this is really good to know, because I mean, what is a principle? A principle is the foundational belief that justifies any ulterior doctrine. Principle, principio, or principium in Latin, principio in Spanish, means the origin, the starting point. If you know the principles of something, then, right, you know the doctrine, or at least you know the basis of it. It's interesting. Usually when they say you're a man of principles, that has a positive connotation, right? Meaning that you follow certain moral principles, right? But every belief, every ideology is based on principles. And, sometimes, it takes a philosopher. We're all philosophers in a way. So it takes certain philosophy, certain reasoning, certain depth to extract these principles and to make principles. So this is really a profound, quote unquote, document. All right. Well, one of the main goals that this document seeks to do, and this was written actually in 2007, not too long ago, so about 15 years ago. One of the goals that this document seeks to achieve is the decriminalization of homosexuality. And what is the Catholic position here? I mean, homosexuality is a crime, not the tendency, obviously. The tendency it's not sinful, but the gay lifestyle is a crime. Now there's a difference between the private and the private and the public realm, right? Obviously, the public promotion of homosexuality, the public display of the gay lifestyle is a crime, right? And should be against the law. So this is important because law is something real. Law is not something arbitrary, made up. Law is an ordinance of right reason, proclaimed by legit authority, according to Thomas Aquinas. So law cannot just be randomly made up. It can't be just according to our whims. Law has to be something that's according to right reason. And homosexuality is against right reason. Heterosexuality, sex within marriage, is according to right reason. Okay, so you really don't need religion to justify. Religion strengthens our natural reason, right? And faith and reason go hand in hand, which is the true Catholic position. So let's talk about some of these principles. It's going to take me, I don't want to do it in one video because it's going to be a little bit too much. There's 29 of them. So we'll do it in 2 videos. All right, so let's go. First thing, what I mentioned in the last video I did, talking about the history of the LGBT, history of transgenderism, is when I was talking about rights. I mean, rights are not based on sexual orientation, right? That is just something, sexual orientation is something, well, if it deviates from homosexuality, it's a disorder. There's no rights based on disorder. Rights are ultimately based on human nature, what we fundamentally desire universally. What we fundamentally desire actually is universal, right? A desire to live. We all have that as a human. Now, me as an individual may have a sexual deviancy desire, right? Deviated desire for, let's say I'm a pedophile. That individual desire, does that mean that turns into a right? No. The rights are based on fundamental universal desires that we all share. The right to life, the right to be educated, the right to know the truth, the right to see God, right? Or the desire fundamentally, and then the right comes from there, the right and the duty. The duty to right, to live in a harmonious society, the right to form societies, right? So rights come from these universal fundamental desires that we share as humans. So this is, again, the document is built on an anthropology that says we are essentially defined by our sexual orientation, and that's not the case, right? Our dignity does not come from our sexual orientation. We are all dignified because we are humans, right? We are creatures of God and redeemed by Christ. So the sexual orientation is not right. It does not determine our dignity in that sense. All human beings. It starts. So the introduction of the Yogyakarta principle, and I do want to share it here. Let me share real quick, and it is right here, and we'll share it here. Good. All right. Here's the introduction. So again, I'm going to leave this link on the bottom, and we're going to see, look at all the principles here. We have 29 principles, 2007 in Jakarta. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. All human rights are universal, interdependent, indivisible, and interrelated. Now, why is that? It has to be based on our fundamental human nature. So they start off right. Right? We are born equally free. Right? Excuse me while I drink a little bit of whiskey. Just a little bit. Sexual orientation and gender identity are integral to every person's dignity and humanity, and must not be the basis for discrimination or abuse. This is not integral to every person's dignity. What the heck? Gender identity doesn't even exist. It's not a thing. Sexual orientation is totally accidental to us. It doesn't essentially define us. Many advances have been made toward ensuring that people of all sexual orientations and gender identities can live with equal dignity and respect to which all persons are entitled. So, okay, it is true that, that there, especially in Islamic countries, they discriminate against homosexuals, right, unfairly, right? They treat them differently, essentially. There's a hard or soft persecution, and that's not right because we're fundamentally humans, right? Then we could be judged by our acts, right, and even by the law, right? But you cannot right? You cannot go against human dignity because of, right, the sexual, um, right, the sexual deviancy. In fact, persecuting or prosecuting rather, criminalizing sexual deviant acts actually enhances human dignity, justifies human dignity. It shows that we're moral agents, right? It proves that we're moral agents. It proves that we're called to, that we have a calling, we have a goal, a higher goal, right? According to nature. Again, nature is rigid, and God's will is revealed in nature, right? Naturally. Um, Nevertheless, human right violations targeted towards person because of their actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity constitute a global entrenched pattern of serious concern. Now, there could be some truth to this, but nevertheless, sometimes there's they seek an equality of outcome in the sense that, wait a minute, oh, how do we know that just because someone who is homosexual is being criminalized doesn't mean they're being criminalized because of the homosexuality? So you have to make that distinction there. Nevertheless, again, as I said before, if there is, right, public display of, right, gay acts, right, which influences culture, which totally degrade culture, that should be criminalized. It should be criminalized. But again, not every person who's jailed who's homosexual is criminalized because of that. You got to be careful with that, because you're seeing that a lot in the race baiting, right? Um, all inequalities are results of racism. No, all inequalities here are results of homophobia. No, right? So we have to be clear on that. They include extrajudicial killings, and this could be a problem, right? Extra, vigilantism, torture and ill treatment, sexual assault and rape, invasions of privacy, arbitrary detention, denial of employment and education opportunities, and serious discrimination in relation to the enjoyment of other human rights. So now discrimination, uh, our laws against discrimination, was it Section 7 of Title, I don't want to get this wrong, I don't remember right now, where they inserted also, so employers cannot discriminate against gender, which doesn't even exist. I mean, gender pertains to language. Gender is just according to biological sex. Gender's in language. Gender is a social convention in language. It's not a social convention in nature, in biology, right? Our gender is our sexuality, is our biological sex. These violations are often compounded by experiences of other forms of violence, hatred, discrimination, and exclusion, such as those based on race, age, religion, disability, or economic, social, or other status. Many states and societies impose gender and sexual orientation norms on individuals through custom, law, and violence, and seek to control how they experience personal relationships and how they identify themselves. I don't know why this document does not mention Islam. I don't understand. Right? I don't understand. Also, with when there's a terrorist act done, they do not mention Islam. I mean, it's, this is clearly, and they had this meeting in Jakarta, right? Again, Indonesia, 90% Muslim. You're not going to mention Islam here. So the Christianities need to tend towards, in this respect, towards the Islamic mentality, right? Just a little bit, not their extreme views of extrajudicial killings of homosexual. No, but homosexuality should be criminalized. Again, not the tendency, the acts in public, not in private, should be criminalized because they affect culture. The thing is, society and laws are the extrinsic principles of virtue. So the laws of society are supposed to provide a apt an inapt environment for the increasing of virtue, right? Every society wants virtuous citizens. So that's what the goals of the laws are, right? Not forcibly, but you want to take out immorality. So the law should be legislated according to morality. and animated by Christian Principles, of course. So here's a preamble. We're not going to read this. There's a lot of stuff here. Let's go to the first principle right away. And I think I just wanted to mention really quick the fact that, we'll just go to the first principle here. All right. And just so you know, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton incorporated this totally, right? This was paramount in their influence for pushing the gay marriage, right? That was under Obama. All right, so states shall, look at this first principle, the right of universal enjoyment of human rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Human beings of all sexual orientation and gender identities are entitled to the full employment of all human rights. Sorry about the whiskey. Hopefully nobody scandalizes out there. It's all right to drink a little bit. Say it's good for the heart. States shall, look at this language. States shall embody principles of universality, interrelatedness, interdependence, and indivisibility of all human rights in their national constitutions or other appropriate legislation, and ensure the practical realization of universal enjoyment of all human rights. Amend any legislation, including criminal law, to ensure its consistency with the universal enjoyment of all human rights. So, before they had sodomy laws, and these were according to right reason, right? These should have been laws that remained. Sodomy laws. I mentioned in my last video, sodomy is something that is very dangerous. Nature tells us, if we go against nature, we jeopardize ourselves. And anal sex is very dangerous, right? We said the line of the anus is much thinner than the line of the vagina. So there's contact there, blood on blood contact is much easier to make. And that's why HIV is spread so much more, right, through anal sex, also known as, it's a religious term, sodomy, right, from Sodom and Gomorrah. And we're seeing now, what's happening in society now, especially with the drag queen kids, Sodom and Gomorrah comes up short, without a doubt. C, undertake programs of education and awareness to promote and enhance the full enjoyment of all human rights by all persons, irrespective of sexual orientation or gender identity. Again, gender identity, it makes no sense. There's no more immutable natures, right? Everything is manipulated. So of course we make ourselves morally, right? We could become virtuous, we become full of vice. But according to this mentality, we make ourselves in the most metaphysical sense. You make yourself, you make your biological sex. You become a man through your actions or through, right, societal influence. So we're even seeing now a special kind of speciesism, because why stop at gender? Why not let species be malleable, right? And we're seeing that. There's a man, Matt Walsh, in his documentary, What is a Woman, which must see. Very interesting. He interviews a trans man. I don't even understand, trans man, trans woman. I don't remember which one has the original biological sex. He interviews a trans woman who is also a wolf, right? Who says she's a wolf. So what makes you a certain thing? What makes you this is totally you, right? It's totally, the subject has primacy over the object, right? The objective reality, meaning extramental reality I have to conform to, is totally manipulated by me. And that's why if you believe in objective truth, people see you as an affront, as if you're attacking them. And you're not, you just believe in objective truth. But because it goes against their very subjective reality, they take it personal. And that's why, right, these satanic attacks. Letter D. Programs of awareness, integrate with state policy and decision-making a pluralistic approach that recognizes and affirms the interrelatedness and indivisibility of all aspects of human identity, including sexual orientation and gender identity. So this is, also gender pluralism is absolutely absurd. And was it in England now? They recognize 100, in the UK, 100 plus genders. So it's totally against the binary view, which is actually funny, because if we're against the binary view, then The whole word trans makes no sense, because you're transitioning from to. That's trans, right? Movement from here to here. Movement, trans, like transportation. But if there's nothing here and there's nothing there, then the word trans makes no sense. The word binary makes no sense. Non-binary. Well, what do you mean? What do you have to, if you're denying something, you have to at least know what that thing you're denying is. Non-binary, what are you denying? Oh, nothing. It makes no sense. You have to have at least, there has to be something in reality that you're denying. Non-binary. Binariness doesn't exist, but I'm non-binary. You see the contradiction? You can't be non-binary unless binariness exists. All right, principle 2, the rights to equality and non-discrimination. Everyone is entitled to enjoy all human rights without discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. On the basis of sexual orientation, which is, again, totally accidental to us, right? Why are we injecting our culture with this? It's like you make it an essential part of you. It's something really sickening. Or gender identity. Gender identity does not exist. It does not exist. Everyone is entitled to equality before the law, yes, but because of our humanity and the protection and equal protection law without any such discrimination, whether or not the enjoyment of another human right is also affected. The law shall prohibit any such discrimination. All right, let's go to the state shall. Let's go to the practical part. The state shall embody the principles of equality and non-discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in their national constitutions or other appropriate legislations. And we see this happening, right? We saw this happening with, including, right, again, I don't know if it's Section 7, that jobs cannot discriminate against gender identity, which again doesn't exist. Including by means of amendment and interpretation, ensure the effective realization of these principles. Repeal criminal and other legal provisions that prohibit or are in effect employed to prohibit consensual sexual activity among people of the same sex who are over the age of consent, and ensure that an equal age of consent applies to both same-sex and different sex sexual activity. This is really the principles also ultimately, these principles ultimately justify pedophilia, right? Bestiality, which I believe is still, someone will correct me on this, maybe in the comments, I believe is still illegal in certain nations. Bestiality, sex with animals, pedophilia, right? Polygamy, right? Marriage with three or four or more. We're seeing the destruction at hand, right? Politics, the law has to be based on morality. Take appropriate measures to secure adequate advancement of persons of diverse sexual orientations and gender identities as may be necessary to ensure such groups or individuals equal enjoyment of exercise of human rights. Such measures shall be deemed to be shall not be deemed to be discriminatory. So this is like kind of like the anti-racists say reverse racism is the way. This is like reverse transphobia or reverse phobia. Let's have heterophobia, right? So to fight against trans homophobia, let's have heterophobia. Let's secure adequate, right, the advancement of these persons of sexual orientation, even to the detriment of heterosexuals, right? Because they're, they have been oppressors for all this time. And let's have the resurgence of the victims. Right? Such measures shall not be deemed discriminatory. Only discriminatory one way, but not the other. Absurd. In all their responses to discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, take account of the manner in which such discrimination may intersect with other forms of discrimination. Right? So this discrimination may be, and again, they see it as fingers of a glove, if you will. Oh, homophobe. If you're a homophobe, you're racist, right? You are a even Islamophobe, right? They're all related into it. I don't know if anyone remembers Hillary Clinton. She was criticizing Trump supporters, calling them deplorables, and calling them Islamophobes, racist, homophobes, exactly those words. Take all appropriate action, including programs of education and training, with a view to achieving the elimination of prejudicial or discriminatory attitudes or behaviors which are related to the idea of the inferiority or the superiority of any sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. All right, we're going to do one more principle. I think I'm going to make this into 3 videos because this is just too long. Excuse me there. Let's go to a third principle here. The right to recognition before the law. Let's go to the states shall ensure that all persons are accorded legal capacity in civil matters without discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. B, take all necessary legislative, administrative, and other measures to fully respect and legally recognize each person's self-defined gender identity. Totally arbitrary, right? You want to, yeah, I remember this, seeing this conversation between a heterosexual who was against the LGBT agenda and a transgender. And he said, well, can't I define myself however I want? And then the transgender said, no, there's certain limits. But then those limits are according to who? Right? Why wouldn't there be, right? Why can't I identify as a two-spirited goat, right? I'm a two-souled goat, right? Why can't I identify as that, right? So it's making a mockery of itself. And even those in the trans community are realizing this, like drag queens, for example. Drag queens totally make a mockery of transgenderism. I mean, they're actually men, right? For the most part, drag queens, they recognize themselves as men. They dress up as women, right, for enjoyment and entertainment, what have you. It's really making a mockery of the trans and transgenderism because they're only women for a certain time. Well, the very definition of drag queen is a man dressed as a woman, right? Which used to be something funny. I mean, you see shows from not too long ago that used to, that made fun of this stuff, right? The boys, when I was younger, if I see a boy dressed as a girl, I dressed as a girl once for Halloween, and I took pictures, and it was funny. My sister dressed she was a boy, I was a girl for Halloween. I think my parents got pretty mad about that, but kids do that, things like that. But it was a joke, right? I wasn't confused about my gender identity. And if a child is confused, quote unquote confused, they want to be a girl, you just take them out of that nonsense. That's pure nonsense, right? The parents, transgenderism is deep down a crisis of authority, of parental authority. There is none. Take all necessary legislative, administrative, and other measures to ensure that the procedures exist whereby all state-issued identity papers which indicate a person's gender, sex, including birth certificates, passports, electoral, other documents, reflect a person's profound, self-defined gender identity. Why is it profound? Who says it's profound? The person says profound, but what do you mean by profound, right? It's random. Why is it not superficial? Again, I know somebody close to me who's really affected by their spouse, married a liberal spouse, and I'm not gonna say too many details because they'll know who they are if they watch this video. And the spouse, again, very liberal, influencing the person I know, and they had a child, and they decided to not assign it a sex, right? To let the child decide. It's just, I mean, would that be a profound decision on the child's part, on the person's part? I mean, it's a war. It's a war on nature. Again, the devil's war now is, again, he wants to attack the supernatural. He wants to attack God through, he can't attack God directly. He wants to attack God through man. But what he's attacking, he realizes that to attack supernature, to attack in the order of grace, in the order of salvation of souls, he must attack what's more fundamental, nature. Right? If he can attack nature, he can attack supernature, right? Our souls, which is built on nature. Ensure that such procedures are efficient, fair, and non-discriminatory. Again, a lot of this is repetition. E, ensure that changes to identity documents will be recognized in all contexts where the identification or a disaggregation of persons by gender is required by law or policy. So again, if you're applying to a certain place or you're filling out a form, they ask you for gender. Now they put other in many places, right? Again, absurd. F, undertake targeted programs to provide social support for all persons experience gender and transition or reassignment. And this is the problem. I mean, a lot of them, it's over 50% now have either committed suicide or attempted suicide. And they blame that on the societal non-acceptance of transgenderism, but that's totally absurd. That's totally absurd. It's based on going against nature, and there's other studies that show that correlation. It's not based on, other studies have shown that it's not based on, because for example, where certain transgenders live, like well, San Francisco, for example, in communities that are very accepting, in a culture that's very accepting, right? Media, academia, entertainment, very accepting. They're still having the 50% or higher suicide rate or attempted suicide. All right, so I think we're going to end it there. I don't want to do a long video on this, too long, right? Just like short snippets, quote unquote snippets. So let's continue praying, and let's fight against this, whatever we can do. Not just talking, but it would be good to go to manifest at these parades, right? Cost what it may, to manifest somehow, defending the truth of God, the truth of reason, which is one and the same. God has given us reason, right, as a guide. It's a God-given guide. So let us continue praying and ask our Blessed Mother to help us. And I'll see you next time. I'll do part 2. We left off with Principle 3. And that's that. All right. Take care, y'all. God bless.